I am going to beat you into the living death.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with the latest edition of the Living Death Show. It is an honor and a privilege to be back before you. We took a little hiatus. I guess we'll save this for the end of the show. We got some format changes that we want to share with you guys, but today warrants a full-on show, just like we used to do. So let's start off by introducing a guest you've seen here a few times here. He is one of our good buddies in the MMA space. You catch him with Ed Carvajal on the Coast to Coast podcast. My man, Matt Hawkins. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing wonderful. Long vacation week, bunch of fights. Happy to get back with you guys after you guys had some time off as well. So get caught up on the world of combat here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, you know, the two gentlemen at the bottom of the panel here, you know them because we love them so much, and we got to introduce them anyway, despite the fact that we really don't have to. Here's up. We'll switch them around in a second here. But first up is the jack of all trades who has mastered them all, the senior editor of SureDog.com and the big homie, Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back. We've been off for a couple weeks. Excited to kind of be back in the new format and to talk with you guys. Couldn't think of a better person to have as a guest than the ultimate road warrior, Mr. Hawkins.
Absolutely. And of course, the panel is anchored every show by the man with the stats, the facts, the figures, and the numbers. He is the associate editor of SureDog.com. Also, my good friend, Jay Petrie. Jay, how you doing today, brother?
I feel a warm feeling right here of joy and excitement to sit down with you boys again. I'm also on the road too, as you can see by my international background here. We're going to have some changes in the show. You know, all things come and go. But this is the good moments. This is the good stuff right here. Speaking of the good stuff right here, there's a certain somebody on Saturday that won and had some good stuff of his own. Aljamain Sterling, the bantamweight champion of the UFC, has successfully defended his title 3 times. Stat of the week is 3 because did you guys know? I mean, you might have heard it on the broadcast. No bantamweight champ has ever done that before in the UFC. It's like the lightweight and heavyweight that it's a surprisingly rotating title, and 3 is now a number that Aljo caught. So good for him, right?
Absolutely,
right? Or do people? No, poor Aljo.
See, only the brother was standing up for him just now. I see what you did there, Jay. So Jay, I want to add to your stat of the week because, you know, not only did he like set the UFC record for consecutive bantamweight title defenses, he also has the longest active win streak in the bantamweight division at, I want to say it's like 9 or something, right?
Yep.
And he also has now the most wins in bantamweight history in the UFC with 14. But he only shares that record with Dominic Cruz if you tie it along with the WEC. So yeah, I had to do a deep dive into stats for some other work. So that's why I'm pretending to be Jay right now.
Sounds like somebody was reading the Fight Facts article.
Hey,
man, I got you.
Yeah, read some stuff. I'm a learned man.
But if I could, Ed, it's remarkable the achievements that Aljamain Sterling has reached in his UFC career. Because first of all, it feels like he hasn't been with the company that long compared to some of the other guys. And second of all, that the disrespect and poo-pooing of his record, of what he's accomplished so far, like this, like right after he defeated Henry Cejudo, whether scores or not, he gets his hand raised against Henry Cejudo, a guy that had only been beaten by Demetrious Johnson and Joseph Benavidez, two pretty good guys. They fought, I guess, whatever. And immediately people were like, well, it was Henry after 3 years away. It isn't that big of a deal. And every single time Aljo seems to do something, the detractors are out in full force. And I'm not sure why.
Well, before we dive into why, remember to like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Jay, yes, you are right. Aljamain Sterling, in my opinion, I would say is probably the most just overall disrespected UFC champion since Tim Sylvia. it's and I know we could talk about like Nico Montoya or GDR or something like that, but I'm talking about actual title reigns that had defenses that actually you had time to sit and breathe and accept the fact that this person holds the belt. Aljamain Sterling, probably since Tim Sylvia, is the most disrespected UFC champion, and I would put Tyron Woodley like right behind that, maybe. So let's get into the why. Ben, I know you had some thoughts you were just about to break down before I had to run a brief promo. So what you're taking? Why is Aljamain Sterling such a underappreciated champion?
There are legitimate reasons. There's some sort of asterisk or caveat attached to almost all of his achievements as a top level fighter. He won the title via disqualification, again through no fault of his own. Like he's a guy that got fouled. He defended it by split decision in a fight that probably wasn't as close as the split decision tallies would seem to indicate. Then he defends it for the next time. The asterisk is he's defending it against a guy that shouldn't have been in there in the first place, was fighting with a concealed major injury. His third title defense should be his record-setting moment. It's another split decision against a guy in Cejudo that we'll know a lot more about this win after Cejudo's next fight. If Cejudo goes out in his next fight and beats Merab Dvalishvili, whom he just called out today, we'll know a lot more about what Sterling really achieved on Saturday night. But for the moment, the naysayers are going to be out in force saying, well, it's Cejudo coming off a 3-year layoff. We have no idea whether that's a quality win or not. Those are the objective reasons that somebody could detract from Sterling's accomplishments. His fight style is not always the most crowd pleasing. It's capable of being. Like, he has some spectacular moments in victory and defeat over the course of his UFC run, but it's not always the case. Those are the objective reasons. Subjectively, the UFC's fan base is extremely ready to dismiss a dominant black fighter, and it's because of the type of fan that the UFC courts explicitly. I mean, that's it.
I feel as though I feel the edge of a rant coming on by me. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Matt. And I want to hear your take on this. Aljamain Sterling, is the disrespect warranted in any way in your mind?
I pretty much echo exactly what Ben just said. I hate to do it, but when you look at it, basically exact same thing. You'd add on top of it that Yan hasn't been successful since that fight, and I've always hated when people did that, when Jones would beat guys and then they'd go on losing streaks, or Fedor. So I'm kind of doing what I hate, but when you look at it, Yan's kind of, maybe he's not as good as we thought he was. I had Cejudo winning on one view. I had Cejudo winning that fight 3-2. So maybe I'm the outlier, but on watching the fight one time, I had Cejudo edging it out. So the other stuff, you would be better to speak on that. I love MMA because my favorite fighters are international fighters. So the idea of judging people by their skin color, to me, is just gross when we're talking combat sports. My favorite fighters are Aoki and Nagano and Rampage Jackson and stuff. So that's weird to me that would be a thing, but I can't disagree. I can't. But I think, is it warranted? No, but are there reasons for it in what's happened in the cage and what's happened to the fighters around the situation with the injuries and stuff? Yeah, I think so. And his style, he's not going out there and one punch KOing people. He's not throwing up flying triangles. Yeah, he had the Suluev stretch a couple years ago, but it's pretty much just a workman's. You mentioned Woodley, and it's kind of similar. They both just go out there, do their jobs, and beat the hell out of people. But it's not the way that, I don't know. Maybe this is the white guy, but it's just not the way that people want to. If you're not hardcore into the sport, it's hard to sit there and be like, yeah, that's the best guy in the world, and I want to watch him fight over and over again. I think that's fair based off some of the stuff we've seen.
I mean, it was a very clear sign when the UFC decided to put him as the headliner, because that's something that the UFC had never done. He'd always been second or third fiddle. Like the Aljamain Sterling is the kind of champion where he might be like the featured fight of the night, where there's 2 more title fights ahead of him and he's fighting for his own belt. I think of guys in the same,
like if Demetrious Johnson was American instead of Asian.
Yeah. I mean, so okay, I'm coming back.
USA.
Noted Evolve MMA fighter Demetrious Johnson.
So I think of guys in the same stratosphere. Woodley's a good one. Ben Henderson.
He actually is Asian. Now I'm gonna
yeah. I was here for the whole thing. I was paying close attention. It was like my proto MMA media days, so I was really, really invested. I don't remember vitriol for him. And when he joined the UFC, let's be clear, he won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight decisions. Multiple were very controversial in his entire debut, from Mark Bocek to Gil Melendez when he defended with a split decision. Multiple decisions that many people thought he lost. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember. I remember frustration, but I don't remember vitriol and ire. I remember almost like a dismissive sigh, like, well, I guess he's going to take his split of the split decision. But I don't remember it being like when Anthony Pettis hit the armbar. I don't remember people going, yeah, like a party in the streets. When Aljo Sterling, if he fights Sean O'Malley and gets plunked, it sounds like there'll be like the UFC will pop bottles.
Yeah. A lot of that is Twitter, though. I feel like Twitter wasn't the same during Benson Henderson. I feel like Twitter's at a point now where everybody uses it, and you get the idiot. Twitter world's not the real world. So even when we're talking about people going after Aljamain Sterling, they're packing arenas left and right still to watch him fight. So
they were booing him and cheering Cejudo in a place that's like an hour from where Sterling comes from.
Yeah. I
don't know. Whoa.
That was
that was weird. Yeah. Like if you're a San Diego fighter fighting in LA, you might not get cheered and you're still 90 minutes apart. Like, is New Jersey and New York, like, is it that tight? Like, that's what I've always kind of wondered, never really understood. Like, it's not, if you fight in the Bay Area and then fight in LA, you're not getting.
But you're talking about the Bay Area and LA culturally are just so far apart, and it's such a great distance apart that there is a complete, it feels like a different world. If you're walking around the streets of the Bay and you walk around the streets of LA, it feels like a totally different place. We're talking about Newark, New Jersey, which you can like look out your window and look into New York City. And the UFC, before they could set up shop in New York proper, they did all their press conferences for the Newark events in New York City. Yep. And you're talking about half the arena. I'm willing to bet you that half that arena came from New York, that they drove across the bridge or whatever tunnel or something takes you over there to watch that fight. And forgive me if this is not the most organized of my thoughts, because there's a lot kind of flooding in my brain right now. I think when we're talking specifically about black fighters that we mentioned, Aljamain Sterling, Tyron Woodley, and Benson Henderson, the outlier in that trio is Ben Henderson for one reason. He's a soft-spoken guy. He's a guy who just through it all is just really peaceful, really humble, and just kind of stays to himself. Tyron Woodley and Aljamain Sterling are not that. They are not that. And in my view, it exposes something that is all across the board with black athletes in every sport. The black athletes that act grateful, or if you want to say, and they're humble and they're soft-spoken, those are the ones that are appreciated. The moment a black athlete says anything and showing confidence, showing cockiness, or showing, dare I say, arrogance, or anything of that sort, anything to show that they are proud of who they are, that's when the vitriol comes. That's when people start poking away. Now we can poke apart certain things with those 3 title reigns as far as the nature of how the fights went. And Matt, to your credit, Twitter, you're right, was not the same. Like, and also I wasn't in media at the time of Ben Henderson's reign. So I'm looking at it through the lens of a fan who would just watch a fight and just kind of go about my day afterwards. So I wasn't entrenched in it like I was as a media member during Tyron Woodley's reign and a media member with Aljamain Sterling's reign. So I'll miss some of the foolishness that social media would have to offer in those cases. But Ben Henderson had a very, very similar type of fight to Aljamain Sterling in his title defenses. Split decisions for the most part. Had some exciting moments, but at the end of the day, no one got finished, and it was anybody's guess who won. But the attention toward them was different when those fights were over with. Also, too, the promotion toward those fighters was different. I don't remember, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember the UFC like actively promoting against Ben Henderson.
No.
I don't remember that happening at all. I do remember the UFC arbitrarily deciding that we needed a interim welterweight champion when Tyron Woodley was undisputed. I do remember the UFC arbitrarily deciding that it needed an interim bantamweight champion when Aljamain Sterling first won the belt. So the promotion has actively targeted these guys to lose. Like, remember the buildup to the Darren Till fight with Tyron Woodley? I mean, it seemed to be to the UFC, at least the way the commercials and everything was going, it seemed to be a foregone conclusion that Darren Till was going to go out and just lamp Tyron Woodley. That seemed to be the sentiment that was being pushed. In this fight, this was all about celebrating Cejudo's return. Not to say he doesn't deserve it, because he is one of the all-time great fighters. But we're talking about a reigning defending champion fighting an hour away from where he's from. That sounds like a big story to me. That sounds like a big deal. That sounds like somebody that you're not necessarily trying to be promoting against. And we're going to see it again when he fights Sean O'Malley. Oh, because we know who the UFC wants to win that.
I mean, Henry Cejudo was the main character this weekend.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like to see the defending champion before he fights and defends that crown, they're running ads for some Fight Pass special about Henry Cejudo, like nonstop.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They did that too.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, you want to see this special about Henry Cejudo? Like, where was Aljo special? Maybe I missed it. Maybe it was something on there and I missed it. But it seems like a hell of a good time to roll out something for him as well. And I'm not going to sit here and just blindly defend Aljamain Sterling. I am very publicly critical of some things about him, not just as a fighter, but just as a man. I have a big problem with some things that he said on social media and some of his allegiances and whatnot. I have a big problem with that, but I still see a black fighter who's being judged the way other fighters weren't.
If I can interject, it comes down to even something a notch past the straight skin color. Because you mentioned the difference in perception and treatment between Woodley and Sterling and someone like Henderson, who, regardless of his mixed heritage, and he is, of course, half Korean and half African-American, presents as a person of color. Throw into the mix Israel Adesanya. He is as outspoken, cocky, arrogant an athlete as you will find in mixed martial arts, period. And I'm not saying that as criticism. I love it. It is, a winning trait in him. But he gets a pass, I believe, from a lot of fans that would profess to be tired of Woodley during his title reign, would profess to, or who would detract from Sterling's accomplishments, because as someone who is of African descent and filtered through, having lived much of his life in New Zealand, there is an exotic otherness about him that is not filtered through North American urban black hip hop culture. The toenail painting, anime loving, like otaku part of his personality makes him different than Woodley, who was literally a rapper, or Sterling, who used to come out in like a gold chain and high top fade looking like slightly violent Rakim Allah. like there is something to them that the UFC's American fan base in particular finds annoying or threatening or whatever.
You know,
like,
Ben,
it is a very hyper-focused animosity.
Ben, I'm so glad you brought that up because it reminds me of another aspect to this whole thing. You look at fighters like Rampage are for the most part beloved, right? Like you'll very rarely find a fight fan of any race that actively dislikes Rampage, and he never got hate, during his title reign or when he fell off and was out of his prime, whatever. Rampage has always been loved. Rampage represents sort of the other side of the personality spectrum because for black athletes, you've got the humble guy, the Ben Henderson, the guy who's just going to go out and do his job, and he's just talk straightforward and he doesn't say anything too controversial and whatnot. You've got the Tyron Woodleys and the Aljamains who their personalities are very much to the forefront. And in the case of Tyron Woodley, like his politics are very much to the forefront, and it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But then you've got the other side, the caricature side. And that's what, and I don't necessarily think he was intending to do this earlier in his career, but notice during the broadcast, John Anik spoke a lot about Aljamain with the chains, right? That was Aljamain with the chain, and the chain and the afro. I think it was John Anik that mentioned that on the broadcast a few times, right? Aljamain Sterling at that time presented as a caricature. He presented as this sort of athlete version of Rakim, as you said, like this 80s rapper is what he and he very much leaned into the stick with that big gold chain that he would wear all the time. And it was sort of played for comedy or whatever the case may be, or branding. All right. That represents a caricature. The moment he dropped that caricature and became a champion, or at the very least became a contender, became a legitimate contender, that's when that vitriol started.
Do you see on the broadcast? Sorry, man. Do you see on the broadcast when it was doing like the fighter entrances sponsored by so and so? You got to see Aljo walk into the arena. DC commented in particular, like that chain he used to wear was fake, and now it's real. And I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ben.
Yeah, so that's really, in my opinion, what how this whole thing breaks down personality wise.
And if you ask Rampage, that was a targeted shtick when he went over to Pride. They said, we want you to start wearing this giant hardware store chain around your neck like the Junkyard Dog, and we're going to create this persona where, and this is uncomfortable for me to spit out, but are like this like homeless ruffian.
That's exactly what they
like.
wanted.
It's one step removed from Bob Sapp jumping up and down on luggage and eating bananas.
Yeah, they wanted.
It's a bit of a big step from that, though, especially considering the time it was, because they basically were doing it like it was the Japanese guy fighting the black dude, and I think it was a little bit of a jump from somebody eating bananas. But to be fair, he did wear the chain. He wore the chain when he fought Marvin Easton at King of the Cage before he made it to Pride. So I can confirm that I was at that fight. So
awesome.
I do know that he did have the chain before Pride. So, but yeah, they did definitely, because they did cut some promos where he was kind of like a scruffy dude, like a street dude. I think against the
former college
fight.
Wrestler, and highly skilled athlete.
Yeah,
and an intelligent guy, and it was a targeted shtick to make him more friendly. Like I'm having to stop myself from using really charged terms here.
Yeah, I can see the restraint in you right now.
They asked him to do a certain dance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was Crazy Horse.
Yeah, and see, and that's
Crazy Horse steered a little bit into the role and actually became a homeless track.
Yeah, Crazy Horse actually is that. But that's sort of
he fought this week.
That's sort of the personality options that are presented for black athletes in general. So obviously, I mean, as I've done many times on this show, I can go further down this train, but I do want to actually talk about the fights themselves. Matt has said he scored it 3-2 for Cejudo. I scored it 4-1 for Aljo. Gentlemen, what was your score?
4-1 as well. I saw the fifth round was obvious. Fifth round was obvious for Cejudo, except it wasn't, which I guess we're going to just start off right here. Because here's the thing. This fight hinged in this fight as an Aljo versus Cejudo hinged on what I believe to be an objectively bad scorecard in favor of the person who I actually thought won. If I can explain that, Derek Cleary, or Clearly, as Bruce Buffer for some reason calls him forever, scored round 5 in favor of Aljamain Sterling to give Aljo 48-47 on his scorecard, which then made it a split decision in Aljo's favor. Now, the other two judges, of course, gave it to the fifth round to Cejudo. So by Cleary making that mistake or whatever he saw, or maybe he was sitting in that exact right spot, because I can't trash them entirely. Maybe he was sitting at this right spot and was unable to see the things that Cejudo did and thought that Aljamain was dodging or whatever it may be. But I still believe it was an objectively wrong scorecard to give Aljo the win. That's mind-blowing to me, that a mistake led to the actual person who I fully believe won, because I gave it 4-1, maybe round 2, but I'm struggling to see 3 rounds for Cejudo, but I'm not against hearing why he won 3.
If that's for me, I thought in 2, I thought he landed some of the bigger shots. I know the numbers doesn't make that sense. I thought he won the 5th, and I thought 2 and 3, I thought he landed the harder shots. Again, I only watched it on the live broadcast, so I didn't sit down and break it down. But as casually kind of watching it and doing my score, I felt, I thought the announcers were pretty well. I don't know if they were biased for either way. I kind of zone them out now two-a-days, but I had it 3-2. I thought it was close. I didn't think it was a robbery or anything like that. I thought it was a coin flip going to the judge's decision. And it was shocked me, though. You bring up that card from Derek Cleary, and it's like, well, there's another reason why a fan reading that after the fight might hold that against Sterling. You see that and you're like, well, okay, he shouldn't have won that fight. Well, again, maybe just because that round was wrong doesn't mean there wasn't 3 that were scored wrong, lower on the cards earlier in their fight on the rounds that could have made that one irrelevant. But again, like I said, I had 3-2 on first viewing or only viewing, and but I could see it going the other way, especially based off of the stats.
Yeah, this was a fight where once it was over with, I was okay with almost any scorecard. The only 2 scorecards I would deem unacceptable would be 50-45 Cejudo, 50-45 Aljo. Those are the only 2 scorecards that I would just dismiss all outright and just like not even entertain it. But anything in between is very plausible. If your scorecard, Matt, 3-2 for Cejudo makes perfect sense to me, although I disagree. If you said 3-2 Aljo, like might, in my opinion, that might be a little generous to Cejudo, but that scorecard makes sense too. Like this was such a close fight, and I think without looking at the stats, because I only watched it once too. I just saw the live viewing, and I haven't rewatched it. Just the stats don't really tell the story of the fight. They really don't. Like, yes, Aljo grossly outlanded Cejudo, and that's relevant. But Cejudo did land some good shots on him. Cejudo did have some very good counters. Cejudo he fought a very smart fight. Kind of leads me to my next point here. In my opinion, with the exception of Aljo getting like a late finish, I think the fight played out in the most perfect fashion to legitimize it. If you're trying to poke holes in Cejudo's presence in this fight, because remember it started off, Cejudo certainly looked rusty that first round. Like he looked really off, and Aljo just kind of did what he wanted for probably like the first 3 minutes or so, until Cejudo seemed like he started picking up steam. And by the second round, Cejudo looked like he was really there. Imagine if that fight ends in the first round while Cejudo is still sort of catching his bearings, right? Imagine the vitriol that Aljo would have gotten then. Oh, this guy, like Cejudo, certainly didn't belong in there, man. 3 years off. Oh man, he's nothing now. Cejudo had enough time to go in there, kind of get a feel for things, and then become himself again. And Aljo beat that guy. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, it seems like a much more legitimate win to me.
Aljo was the betting underdog. Like, clearly enough people thought Cejudo was going to be in good competitive shape to push the line in that direction for a guy that had not fought in 3 years. So there's a whole lot of revision and excuse making happening after the fact if people want to detract from what Sterling did.
And that Henry won the 5th round. I know we said that, but that he conclusively won the 5th round, which means you can't say his conditioning wasn't there, his fighting ability wasn't able, because he excelled later on when we wonder. I mean, it was Sterling Yan 1, where Sterling was like almost frantic, and by the end of the 3rd round he was kind of cooked, and then the DQ happened. It's tough to take away. I can't in good conscience look at this and find a way to really, other than the score itself, to go, yeah, he beat Cejudo coming off a layoff, but you saw Cejudo in there. Like, this is the division we talk about, and Ben, you and Ant both took me to the woodshed that time that I compared the heavyweight top 5 to the bantamweight top 5. And the point that I will make in this moment is that the high level of skill and competitive nature and everything these top bantamweights offer, there are going to be split decisions because they're just so damn good. They're so good at everything. Whereas, you look at, some fighters that are ranked in the top 15 in their division, and you go, well, there's a very clear path to win against so-and-so fighter. Point to me how somebody could go in there with a game plan to beat Aljo Sterling or Henry Cejudo that would work 5 times out of 5, and I'd laugh, because I don't think that's how it works. Nope. So I'm actually okay with this, just because I thought it was so competitive, and I mean, it was remarkable that Aljamain Sterling landed more takedowns than Henry Cejudo, and the whole thing. I learned something, and I didn't know if I would.
And reversed him with a peek out, like over and over. Like, some of the best wrestling we've seen in a mixed martial arts contest in a while. Oh, beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I don't think you can look at Aljo's wrestling game with anything but absolute reverence after some of the things that he pulled off throughout the course of 5 rounds in this fact.
Yeah, I mean, I just think a big takeaway from it for me is that there's a little bit of a storyline for possibly a rematch down the line. You had Sterling still, adds to his resume, beats a 2-time, 2-division champion, fights close enough on the scorecards where I can look at it as a fighter, somebody who's kind of rooting for Cejudo, and I'm rooting for him because I'm rooting for like this omni greatness. You got a 2-division champion. If he comes back and wins, like, all of a sudden I'm going, okay, Sterling can still win the title again down the line. But right now I'm looking at a guy who like is going to be borderline Mount Rushmore if Cejudo gets the title back and defends it once or twice more. And I thought Cejudo looked good for a guy who hadn't been in there 3 years. And it was that close. So there's part of me that's going like, well, let's see Cejudo maybe be active for a year, and 2-3 fights down the line, get a rematch. Maybe it's, maybe it's a title shot. Maybe it's not. Maybe they just fight each other if Sterling loses to one of the other guys. But I just think I think it was a close enough, good enough, entertaining enough fight where they could be a rematch down the line. And you kind of wonder where each of these fighters are still going to go from here. And, I think it works for the UFC as far as how everything worked out. A little bit of controversy, but you still had a good competitive fight.
Great.
What I really, really liked was Henry Cejudo at 36 after this layoff and an Olympic wrestling career, and all that he came from there looked fresh as a daisy. Like, we know there's that cliff. We know fighters hit that in the 35 to 38 range, generally speaking. I mean, even Haniaya just bumped into that the other day. Uriah Faber taking out Ricky Simon notwithstanding, there's that time. And I want to say I expected to see it, but I didn't see it at all. Henry, he was on for 22 minutes of that fight, besides the first 3 minutes that Ann talked about.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too that Henry Cejudo didn't have like a regular retirement. He didn't take like like you notice the extra girth around Daniel Cormier since he retired, and that broadcast booth, and it's just less and less room for him at that table as the events go on. You can look at other fighters who've gone to Hollywood and they've done movies and whatnot. And Donald Cerrone has taken a litany of steroids since, and like you see these massive physical changes, and they're refocusing life. Henry Cejudo became one of the best coaches in mixed martial arts after his retirement. Like we just weeks ago were praising that masterful performance that John Jones did to win the heavyweight title. Well, Henry Cejudo had a lot to do with that performance. Davidson Figueiredo, when he beat Brandon Moreno in, was it their third fight? Henry Cejudo had a lot to do with that. So we're talking about a guy who not only like stopped the who just stopped competing. He didn't just stop competing. Like he stopped competing and then put his mind toward competition, and somebody who was already had excellent fight IQ and made great decisions in the moment. That's somebody who just sat in the room and just thought about that for 3 years and helped these guys who are already well-established champion level fighters get better. So we're not talking about a regular retirement ending here. That I think that's very, very important to note. So gentlemen, let's go on and keep things pushing, because we do have a couple other fights on this card to talk about before we get into the goings on this past week in Denver. Now, the UFC's co-main event, a late notice fight, 5-rounder too, which we'll get into that. Belal Muhammad gets a very clear decision win over former title challenger Gilbert Burns. Belal Muhammad now supposedly is next in line for the title shot after what was he on, like a 9-fight win streak, I believe it is.
He has a no contest
or unbeaten streak, 10-fight unbeaten streak, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think he makes good on that title shot, or will something come up?
Covington is right there. Like, I still kind of sneakily think Covington will steal this somehow.
Well, Covington is. I should have rephrased it. The winner of Edwards and Covington, does he fight that guy? Because it seems like the UFC is very.
If Covington beats Edwards, they're going to rematch immediately.
Okay, yeah. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. First of all, the fight shouldn't happen. I don't like the UFC putting together a fight like that on 3 weeks notice. And it wasn't one of those, well, we knew about it 3 weeks ago, but they've known about it for 12 weeks. Well, no, because Gilbert Burns fought 4 weeks ago against Jorge Masvidal, and he beat him up pillar to post for 5 rounds. So you saw the wear and tear of a guy who was not quite back in the game and a fighter who wasn't quite equipped with the game plan, and yet he still won 4 rounds out of 5 or whatever we had it as.
Jay, sorry to interrupt there. Just I just want to add a little more context. We saw 2 men coming into that cage, very clearly compromised. Belal Muhammad was like a couple of weeks removed from Ramadan.
Yeah, thank you. That's yes, exactly.
He spent a month fasting, and then went into an abbreviated training camp for a 5-round fight. Against a guy who I wrote this, so I'll just go ahead and use this quip again. Like he fought a guy who didn't even have time to take a shower in the locker room after beating Jorge Masvidal before focusing on the next fight. So you're talking about 2 guys who are already physically depleted, and then you put them in a 5-rounder without a belt, and it wasn't a main event. Why?
To make it seem, to entice Belal to taking it, because they promised the title shot. You know what? Maybe this is going to be a Living Death Show exclusive. I don't think Belal is going to get the next title shot. I think something's going to come up. I think something stupid's going to happen. I think Ben may be mentioning that if Colby wins and the immediate rematch happens, and he has to sit in the shelf and fights a Shavkat Rakhmonov, and everybody goes, oh. And Ben writes one more of those, the journal entry of he has to fight 2 people. He has to fight a monkey with a chainsaw. He has to, all the people he has to go through to get this title shot. He has to fight John Nutt and Rampage Jackson over in Full Metal Dojo. It's just, no, Belal's not going to get the next title shot, and that's too bad.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, I also think Usman's still not I mean, I don't know when Usman's next fight is going to be, but let's say he goes out there, beats a top 10 guy, and somehow Covington beats Edwards. Does Usman do Usman Covington 3 at that point with Usman? You know, I mean, there's ways that if Edwards gets hurt in that fight and can't do a rematch. I mean, there's so much stuff. I think Muhammad falls into the category of how do we want to market him, and does an Edwards Muhammad headliner sell the tickets that the other ones would? And I think that's what the UFC is all about now. It's not about, I mean, it never has been in the last, since the tournament days. It's always been about who can make the most money at the gate, and they brag about that. So they're not going to put on a pay-per-view that's not going to maximize what they can get out of Edwards. I think Edwards, although he's a great fighter, is still a guy who's borderline on with the casual fans on, like, are you going to pay $85 to watch him versus a guy that's not Usman or maybe Covington? You know, I mean, there's not a lot of people that I know the guys are craving to spend $85 on a pay-per-view when it's not Adesanya, you know, McGregor, you know, Poirier, Justin Gaethje kind of thing. Everybody else seems like you're kind of fall in the same boat, and unless you have a name, you're going to have a harder time getting that main fight right now.
Yeah, and the way that fight played out, it certainly didn't do Belal any favors as far as you know, what direction the UFC is going to go in the future, because clearly the message is loud and clear. If Colby Covington is getting that title shot, the way, and this was decided well before Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad were even scheduled to fight one another. As you can recall, during the Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman rematch, Colby Covington was all over the broadcast. He's getting post-fight interviews. The camera is going to him cage side, and he's doing his little thing. It was very clear what direction the company was headed toward, which makes it very clear that the company is headed toward the entertainment realm as opposed to sporting integrity for this welterweight title. There is nothing about that Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns fight that screams entertainment, and they, at least to the point where it's going to trump the no pun intended, that it's going to overtake the clear juggernaut of personality that they're trying to queue up with Colby Covington. Like, there's no way. Like, there's nothing about that. If Muhammad went out there and like attacked, like if him and his team realized that Burns was fighting with one arm, you know, earlier, and he just went out there and just attacked and got some spectacular finish, okay, maybe we have a conversation. Maybe we've got something to talk about Belal skipping the line, even if it's that good. But that's not what happened. Like, we saw like a pretty slow decision that those two rounds just made things so much worse. Like sucked the air out of the building, in my opinion. Granted, I wasn't in the building, but from the sounds of the broadcast, didn't sound too live in there.
Bilal's just lucky that Chimaev isn't fighting at 170 anymore, because that would have been the obvious next one for whatever reason.
Yeah, I definitely see Shavkat being next up for Belal, and that's sort of that would serve as, for the UFC, like sort of like an A/B test thing. Like, yes, let them figure out who's going to make the jump into actually being a more marketable fighter. And maybe the in-cage results will give that, or maybe one of them will just cut a badass promo when it's all over. We don't know, but I think the UFC lets that play out while they are clearly focused in other aspects.
Rakhmonov swoops in on a rope, grabs Lorosenko, and swings away and off the rafters and runs off.
But I'm telling you, man, like I've said it on here before, and I certainly hope this is not the case. But I got a feeling, man, Conor McGregor is going to insert himself in this welterweight title picture. If he beats Michael Chandler, if that fight even happens at this point, expect that to be a major disruption. Colby Covington beating Leon Edwards, and a Conor McGregor, you know, proper 12 Twitter rant turns into a fight booking. Don't be surprised.
Colby versus
God, I hope it doesn't
Conor.
happen.
I need to take like a wire brush bath thinking about that fight.
Yeah, I think if that fight happens, I think I'm going to quit MMA coverage altogether. Like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, just just done, and I'll start becoming a tennis reporter or something. No. All right, fellas. Well, I'm gonna throw a question out at you here. UFC strawweight division, the women's strawweight division, man. Is it time? I say it's time for a China versus China strawweight title fight. Do you agree with me, or are you wrong?
I think
Normally, go for it, Matt.
I was just gonna say I think that it makes the most sense right now. You know, Fight Night China. Just I don't think it's pay-per-view headliner, and it's gonna be crazy hours of the time of the day. But I mean, if I'm UFC, I'm doing it. You talk about entertainment and money. That's the one that makes sense.
Yeah, normally I would say no. Yan is 2 fights removed from a 2-fight losing streak against women that are very much still there in the middle of the strawweight top 10, but she has strung together a couple of pretty impressive wins at the perfect time to do so, because the way the strawweight top 10 looks right now, she's almost doing just some broken field running, or, you know, slaloming through a big car crash on a moped. Almost everyone else in that strawweight top 10 is either coming off a loss, has already fought Weili Zhang, or is pregnant, or in the case of Carla Esparza, all of the above. Yeah, like Torres and Esparza are both pregnant. Most of the rest of the top 10, again, has already lost to Zhang or is coming off a loss, in 2 cases to Yan herself. It just happens to be time. And this is something that if the UFC can find an excuse to do it, it will. As long as we have known that the UFC has wanted to break into Mexico and Spanish-speaking Latin America as a market, they are more incentivized to break into China as a market. The broadcast deals there, the Performance Institute that they have in Shanghai that is 3 times the size of the one in Vegas, this massive investment, and seeing China as kind of a linchpin to its future, it needs this fight. And if it can find any excuse to make it, it will.
It makes all the sense in the world, right? I mean, there's just, in terms of, I mean, I don't know if in terms of selling is the right word, because selling pay-per-views isn't really, I mean, Weili Zhang, I don't know her to be much of a draw in terms of that metric. But in terms of putting butts and seats in a region, you just, how is that not UFC Shanghai main event? Boom, big, put everybody you possibly can. But knowing the UFC, it means they're going to like put on a show in like Ho Chi Minh City and be like, here, we're kind of close to China. Let's put on the title fight because that's cool.
I can't believe you called it Ho Chi Minh City. I'm going to throw my can of soda at you right through my fucking screen.
That was a love letter to Ben. Yeah, the UFC is so obviously going to be like, yes, we're going to put on this big fight and then go to Singapore. Like, hey guys, because think of Africa, think of Mexico, think of all the balls they've dropped, and be like, oh yeah, that made all the sense in the world. Let's do this. Why didn't we do that? No, this is going to be UFC Fight Night Manila. I hope our guys don't smoke weed. That's the kind of show it's going to be.
But at least this time though, they've done the Weili Zhang title shot in China already. They've done this, so it's not like they have to do any extra work for it to happen, right? It's not like they're setting up shop in Hawaii when they have, you know, two separate times with separate dominant champions, right? And they just drop the ball on that. They're not doing that. It's not like, you know, setting up infrastructure in Africa when you've got 3 reigning champions that are dominant, and you just drop the ball on that. They've already done this in China, so just do it. And on top of that, yeah, on top of that too, like what an incredible come up for their Performance Institute in Shanghai to have a fighter that trains out of that Performance Institute in the title fight against another Chinese fighter. Like that, that sells itself as perfect. It's absolutely perfect. They should. I'm always the one who's crying about merit and whatnot. This is a time where I'm like, okay, Aaron Blanchfield, you chill out. Amanda Lemos, go ahead, chill out. It's not for you just yet. Oh, and I mean, they ought to pull something from the One Championship like playbook and just make all these Chinese fighters like
announce themselves as being from UFC Gym Shanghai, like
Yeah.
one does with Evolve.
Yeah.
Like, forget China Top Team, forget that Xiaonan Yan's real turnaround came from moving to Team Alpha Male, and just be like, oh yeah, they all trained at the PI in Shanghai.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
So we're all saying is like September 23rd, Saturday, September 23rd, UFC Tacoma, Washington main event, Zhang versus Yan.
And when they actually make it to China again, they'll pull Kung Lee out of retirement to fight there. He's Asian. Nobody.
Yeah, they won't know.
He's from Ho Chi Minh City, motherfucker.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, that was hilarious. Okay, gentlemen, so let's go ahead and keep things pushing here, because One Championship made a huge milestone this past week. They had a United States show. They had a show in the first city that housed the UFC, Denver, Colorado. Our buddy Matt Hawkins actually attended this show. Of course, Matt goes to every show he possibly can, and he was at this one. Matt, please tell us what the live experience was.
He goes to every show he possibly can, and some he can't. He's like the fucking Santa Claus of MMA. How did you go to this many shows? Like,
just right place, right time, whole life. Hour San Diego, hour LA, 3.5 to Vegas, hour flight to San Jose, and mixing in a couple New York trips.
You Groupon Denver this past week?
I had a friend who lives there. Old roommate lives there, so I had a place to stay. So, and I've Southwest points are God's gift to me for getting around town. But BKFC last week. I don't, we're not gonna get deep into that, but hell of a show. The arena they used was the same one used. I'm guessing somewhere in the 7,000 seat capacity, maybe 6,500. I didn't look it up myself, but that's the feeling I got. Really just a giant big lower bowl, perfect size. Both organizations nailed it with that. Standing room only around the top of the bowl. Every seat sold. Fair price points. Other than the front row stuff was a little bit lunacy, but fair price points to get into the arena for both events. The one, BKFC was wild, hectic, bloodbath, everything that, Alvarez Mendez was fascinating to watch, for me to watch two guys that I, loved watching in the MMA world just duke it out and end in a split decision with dueling knockdowns in the last round. Fun. But to get to the MMA stuff in one, the funnest event I've been to that I can remember. And I don't want to be dramatic. Maybe going back to the Affliction days of seeing the spectacle of Megadeth playing on the stage while Fedor and Gary Goodridge are walking out and stuff like that. That might be the something like that. But to walk into this arena, to see that gigantic stage, Bellator does a stage. This was like Pride. I felt like I was at as close to I could get to sitting at an international Pride show as possible. You had the giant screen, you had the smoke, you had a little bit of fireworks. The crowd was the most knowledgeable crowd I've ever been to at an MMA event, and that's what actually was going to be the surprise for the week for me, is that I didn't believe I couldn't believe sitting there and having them go from Muay Thai to grappling to MMA, the fans cheering everything from start to finish. I had people from Pakistan sitting behind me. I had people from Yemen down the aisle. I had people from Vietnam in front of me. There was people from Brazil, obviously America. It was the coolest atmosphere, the most knowledgeable fans I've ever sat around, where they were cheering submissions. They saw the escapes, good strikes, no booing. And I commented the main event was I had the event at a 10 until the main event, and it dropped it down to about an 8.59 because the main event wasn't spectacular. If that main event had popped off spectacular, to me, it would have been a 10 event. The Rodtang KO was awesome. The other Muay Thai match, Jackie Bunton. It just she hit her right in the mouth, and you're just going, it was just so much fun. It was so much fun. The atmosphere, the VIPs were down below. They had them catering out food, trays of sushi to them, bringing them drinks. I wasn't a part of that, but just seeing that, you're like, this is what I feel like this is what MMA was supposed to be for me when UFC bought Pride. And I said it earlier this I went to WrestleMania, and walking into that arena and seeing that stage that was the size of Maine, you know, in the middle of SoFi Stadium. And the first thought that went through my mind when I saw that was, this is what it was supposed to be. This is what the Super Bowl of MMA once a year or on a special occasion is supposed to be. And the UFC and Zuffa and Endeavor, I feel like they've stripped that away over time, you know, and I'm going back old school with the, you know, board, you know, the walk ramps for UFC and stuff, but that's what it's supposed to be. It shouldn't be about selling that last couple hundred tickets or 1,000 tickets. It should be giving the fans in that arena an experience that it's not going to match anything like they've ever seen before. And you could not have gone to that one show. And if you go to that one show and then you go to UFC the next day, yes, you're going to see better fighters. Yes, you're going to see ranked guys that you've known for 5-6 years, but it's just not the same. It's that the energy in that crowd. I mean, you had Mike Musumeci doing grappling, and that crowd's chanting his name. And I'm going, dude. Like, I mean, I went to Bellator kickboxing. I've been to Mighty Mouse fights where people just walked out halfway through it. This was there. Not a single person left their seat until they announced the winner of that fight. You know, and you're just going. It was just a different realm. And even the BKFC crowd, although it's a different crowd, it's a little bit more of a rough. You know, we're here to watch blood and guts. It was just, everything was so much fun because it was just so different. It wasn't the cookie cutter that we get every week. And, you know, I've said it for a long time. If you're not doing Fight Circus, if you're not doing Ryzen, if you're not doing Pride, if you're not doing One, you're not doing this combat shit right. Like, if you're just watching the UFC or just watching Bellator even, like, you're not doing it right, because it shouldn't all be serious. It should be fun, and you should get to, and it needs to be cultural, and you need to see what's going on in Asia. And to me, it's just, that's what makes this sport so great. It's not just going to Petco Park. It's, I'm going to, you know, I don't even know, Shanghai Stadium or whatever, you know what I mean? And that's what it felt like was, you know, they brought, you know, the super arena to the US, and it was an awesome spectacle to see.
No, man, I'm so glad that you could share what that live experience was like, because that translated very well on the broadcast. It translated extremely well on the broadcast in a way that it doesn't when one is set up shop in Singapore or, you know, or Ho Chi Minh City or wherever they set up shop in Asia for whatever show it is. Like, it felt like this huge event. It felt like you could feel, I mean, partly because they had that damn drum that was just beating it. And that thing drives me insane. I hope they cut that out. Like, it feels like
I had never noticed it. And we're sitting there and it's about the first second fight, and all of a sudden it clicks, and it's like a heartbeat in the arena. I mean, yeah. And they speed it up like when intent. I actually kind of liked it because I could zone it out while in the arena. Like, it wasn't like it was bothering me. I mean, I've been to Muay Thai where they play the horns or the drums, and yeah. I'm going, by the second fight, I'm about ready to, you know, pull what few strands of hair I have left out of my head. And this was like, it just added to the atmosphere. It was like everything was perfect because you felt like you were in a Van Damme movie. And that's
just,
like,
it was anxiety, man. It's just the anxiety. It was like, it's not healthy, man. It's not healthy. That it just bothered me because I have anxiety issues. So it really bothered me.
And you're the guy that's like been in the most fights of all of us. So like, it's just like hitting your actual fight or flight reflex. I mean, here's what you can say for production values, presentation, and timing. Singapore Indoor Arena, which is, or Singapore Indoor Stadium, sorry, in Kelang, which is one's de facto home base, is twice the size of the place where they held the event in Broomfield. It seats like 12,000 people, but which one felt bigger? The one where, you know, they were able to really bring the production values to bear that they want to, that they envision for themselves, you know, probably for every event. But yeah, like, there's something different about it being an occasion, like their first foray into North America. And frankly, even as a group that at least the three regulars of us here are often pretty hard on one championship, everything that was under their control was knocked out of the park, from the production values down to just the nuts and bolts regulatory shit. Like, whatever holes we want to poke in the weight and hydration system, they met their own stated standards. The storm that seemed to be brewing with the Colorado Athletic Commission, like, fizzled. because that as recently as a week ago, I was like, is this going to kill this event? You know, the like allowing knees to the head of a downed opponent. Like, yeah, just it like I wasn't in the arena for the event, so I'm not even going to try to give it like a number score. But as far as putting their best foot forward in their first foray into North America, A+ for one championship.
No, and I was surprised, Jay, that wasn't your number of the week. Is that I fly to Colorado to go watch some dudes get hit in the head with a grounded knee, and there's not one thrown in an entire event.
They did the Shamrock versus Severn like backstage like handshake agreement.
Exactly.
I was waiting for stomps. I was waiting for something, but I can't knock him on that. I mean, Ant and I sometimes go back and forth for how ready we are to be able to throw shade at one, and it's deserved for many reasons. And we're not just crapping on it for the sake of content. We're expressing actual flaws and problems and execution. There were a few things, of course, there's always going to be, but I'm going to say it about the UFC where there's backs and forths. But this went about as well as it could have gone for one, basically across the board, because I had reservations about the weight and hydration coming over. And then to see Tony Cummings, the commissioner of the Colorado Combative Sports Commission, right there was so important, because for me, that for just this event, not everybody else, not everywhere else, validated this. And that was an important step for me. And I think that was a sign to other international organizations that have stayed out of the U.S. out of concern for regulatory differences and having to adhere to the unified rules and the standards therein. I know Ryzen is trying to come to the States. Hawaii is the state that we're looking at, and that would bring the Ryzen rule set. And I think that the way one pulled this off with Colorado worked very well. I am very excited to attend the ABC conference this July, because you better believe that's coming up, and there's going to be some fighting on the floor. There's going to be some people angry because the ABC was not happy with how Colorado rubber stamped it. So I'm excited to see how that's going to play out. But it worked. There wasn't the like you said, Matt, there wasn't the knee to the head of a grounded opponent that people go, oh, and no, it could have been bad. No, so they didn't have the scenarios people were worried about seeing, and that helped one. I mean, the big takeaway, the submission grappling, the first one, which was just a standing match, was just a drag, and sometimes you go, okay, I see how it doesn't work, but then Mike Musumeci gets up there and does his wizardry, and you go, oh, this is awesome. But the biggest thing, and I say it was one of the few things I said on social media about the event, because I was covering a bunch of things at once, when Rod Tang got the knockout, and the crowd was chanting Rod Tang. Colorado fans, yes, the Yemen people, Pakistan, all of the people that you were sitting near too, yes, but people in Broomfield, Colorado were chanting the name of somebody they probably never heard of. Many of them had never heard of, because let's be honest, Muay Thai isn't a big deal in Colorado. Spoiler alert. To hear them all chanting Rod Tang I felt that. And I didn't think I'd feel that kind of anything from a one card. It gave me hope. I mean, this is a 40-year-old Rod Tang getting up there and crushing a fool. And it made me think, oh, maybe there's a market for this after all. Oh, maybe there's interest. Maybe there's something. Oh, maybe Ant's dream of a whole fight card of Muay Thai and little gloves is something we can do over here, and it will go big. And I had that moment of the door opened, and I appreciated that. I'll be sure to have more to crap on one next week and the days to follow. But you guys get a pass because of Rod Tang. You're welcome.
It was such what I'm hoping that this is a springboard for like breaking up the monotony. So Matt, if like your statement a little bit earlier, if you were to attend one championships event in Colorado, and then the next day you're in New Jersey for UFC 288, like one Herb Dean, who probably Probably should have taken a night off. You know, we
Both nights off probably would have been fine.
Travel with the judges. If the judges shouldn't be traveling, probably the refs shouldn't either. You know, in such a short span of time, that's another story.
Shaolin did both events too.
Yeah.
Referee Shaolin Rivera. He was at one end UFC.
Yeah. So with that being said, like, I hope this is a springboard for breaking up the monotony. If you were at both events, I'm pretty sure you're more entertained by the one in Colorado. I'm pretty sure that's the case, right? I'll say that it's even to the intelligence level of the fans to go from like a crowd, an American crowd chanting Rod Tang and applauding, you know, submission grappling, applauding like two guys exchanging heel hook attempts, to then the reigning defending champion an hour away from his hometown getting booed. At this point, I think it's good to have the monotony broken up. I like to look at MMA sometimes and not see that bluish gray cage floor. I like to see something different. I'd like to see different techniques. I'd like to see different rule sets. You think about like the all the money that's been left on the table by the UFC with their this dogmatic devotion to sticking to the brand as is, and they take the same brand, the same thing everywhere they go. To have like one championship with this mix of different martial artists in there in that same fighting surface, and you got Muay Thai in there, you got the grappling and all that stuff. The UFC could have done this so long ago. All the fighters that want to box, they say they want to box, and all the fighters that come from Muay Thai backgrounds and stuff. You mean you couldn't have like some exhibition to break up a card, to just have you know, a couple of welterweight guys that aren't necessarily in title contention, but let's throw them in a kickboxing match just to see what happens. Crowd might like that. You
know that Nico Price and Randy Brown would sign that 10 out of 10 times.
Exactly. You have all that. You have all those resources there to do things and to try things and to experiment. It's the UFC. The brand isn't going anywhere. Let's get creative, guys. I hope this sparks something creative, and especially on a weekend we have this supposed to be huge UFC event, but then you've also got equally entertaining output from one championship, from BKFC the week before that, to Masvidal's like his bare knuckle MMA. Like, you've got all this good from Ryzen, like you've got all this difference and variety in the product. Damn it, I want to see more. I want to see variety. If one championship is the gateway to that, please, I will roll out the red carpet to Chatri myself. Chatri, please bring it. We need something different. We need something that's exciting to watch, that's not the same thing over and over again. In a couple minutes here, we're going to talk about this UFC on ABC 4, I think it is, card. Is it ABC 4 or 5 or whatever?
4.
Do we care, fellas? Do we care?
Meh.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we get every week. We need something different.
Yeah, and I think it's, as a fan right now, it's the time that we should embrace. You know, we can say that, but it's up to, and not just up to us, it's up to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to tune into this stuff. And we can put a voice out there and let people know that aren't watching it. But like, there's never been a better time as far as that outreach for all the wildness, whether it's, you know, you can watch it on Amazon Prime now. You get one. It's not some foggy link that you're trying to get at 5:30 in the morning. It's prime time on a Friday night. You don't have to watch every event. I don't watch every event. But if it's on Prime on a Friday night and some familiar names are on it, of course you should tune in and check it out. It's different. BKFC, it's different. It's a cheap app. You can, for the price of a pay-per-view, you can get that thing for 2 damn years and watch every event. You know, it's not for everybody, but you grab a beer and tell me you sit there, and if you've ever, and once you go to an event, it's a different world. Like it's a throwback to the old school. Like, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the night. Like, I hope nobody really like goes down bad, but it could happen. You know, like that thought kind of like, while it's not a great thought, it's something that kind of always got your blood flowing at the old school events. Like, I don't know what's going to happen in an hour. Like I don't. Whereas UFC now has become such a, you just expect the same thing. You expect a handful of decisions. You know, I mean, I can't even remember the last. It probably happened yesterday, but the last big spectacular head kick KO, or like it just everything blends together now. So because there's one every week, and I think that, you know, I don't think the grappling thing. I'm a little bit. I love grappling. I used to cover some EBI events. You know, I love all that stuff. You know, my co-host Ed's a black belt in BJJ. We talk about it all the time. But I don't know if that's the UFC crowd. I think if you had those in, mix that in, I think the UFC crowd would empty their seats and go grab beers, which might be what the UFC actually wants. They might want you going to buy beers rather than watch their product, because then you can't complain about something you didn't really watch. But the small glove Muay Thai, man, I mean, that's spectacular. Like I don't see how. You know, if I was watching that and it was Eddie Alvarez against Conor McGregor, I mean, like, just it makes your mind blown out, like what you could really watch, like if they expanded stuff, or at least let guys do it. I wouldn't even call it UFC. I'd call it Dana White's, you know, Muay Thai Contender Series. Call it whatever. I mean, whatever the hell you want, but like maybe not use the same banner and stuff. But why can't you have UFC Pride? Like, why can't that happen once a year where they go there, have those open rules, allow the, you know, offer it to some of their top names who they you know, maybe they don't want to, you know, John Jones getting soccer kicked, but you offer it to, you know, Israel Adesanya or something, you know? I mean, like, why can't we do that? That's what the UFC took away when they bought Pride, was that other thing, and now we've got it coming back in other small forms. Fight Circus, you joke about it, it's crazy, it's gotten more crazy every event they have. But there's still some aspects of that are like, okay, like this is kind of fun. Like, who wouldn't want to watch John Jones fight 3 guys? Like, you know, who wouldn't want to watch it? Now I'd prefer that they weren't, you know, I'd prefer that they had some athletic ability. That would add more fun to it in my mind. But I don't know. I mean, that's the extreme, but everything one did, everything BKFC did, from the promotion to the fan friendliness to the nailing the arena size. If I'm one, I stay at that arena in Colorado. I sign like 3 fights a year. I go there like every 4 months, and I sell that bitch out. And I make that event sold out 6 weeks prior to the event. Like, there was no tickets available. When you clicked in looking for tickets, it said inventory is sold out.
Yep.
So they sold it, and I don't know if the fans were. It's either they were the most knowledgeable or they were naive and just absorbed everything they saw. But like Rod Tank's dancing off camera in the corner, and the crowd's dancing with him, and you know, I mean, maybe it was just not knowing, so you just absorb it as like, oh, this is great, I love this, I'm here. Or you're just super knowledgeable and you follow one, and you're a martial arts fan. But like I said, the 2 crowds, man, they impressed the hell out of me. And to sit there and not see fights in the crowd and not hear shit talking, and it just be like, wow, like this is so much fun. We're watching Ben Rothwell fight Bernal. I mean, it was just everybody felt like they were watching something that we hadn't really seen before, as far as just pure entertainment. And that's what it made it really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, we need more of that. We need to see that happen more often. So let's keep things pushing here. Quick question. A couple of quick questions I'm gonna throw at you before we move on to one of our final segments for the afternoon here. All right. So we had 2 ex-flyweight champions fighting over the weekend, 2 all-time greats, Demetrious Johnson and Henry Cejudo. Which one is most likely to fight again after this weekend?
Cejudo. I think they're both going to fight again.
I think, honestly. I think they both fight. I think Johnson felt invigorated by that crowd. Hearing the crowd chant DJ, I feel like he got something that night that he never got in any of his UFC fights. And I wasn't even a huge DJ fan early in his UFC career. To me, he was a small guy. I wasn't a huge fan of the thing. But seeing that intro, seeing him on the big screen, seeing him, you know, do his pose, you know, hell, I mean, I'm sitting here with a friggin' bobblehead now of the guy, you know, like. You know, I think he got something out of that fight that he craved maybe earlier in his career, and
people still in the arena at the end of it.
Not a single person left their seat. It was wild.
What's so funny? I think obviously, the talk around DJ was that this potentially was going to be his final fight.
Yes.
I think one was very ready to just go on. We got another one for you.
Yeah.
Just in case, they saw what was going on and said, hey, push homie and like jump in the cage and get in his face.
Yes, that was super intentional. We got another guy.
It's like, are you going to retire? Well, let me talk to my wife. All right, get in the cage. Go. Good. You going to fight him next? Just jump in there.
Yeah.
They want to keep that man. Keep that man active.
Yeah, they do. They do. And yeah, I have to. They're both 36. This is what they do. I mean, I can see them. I can see at least one fighting until 40, and you go, I don't know. Now we're starting to push it, but MMA retirements aren't real. So these guys are fighting. What I would be, it's never going to happen because that era of the sport was a one and done. Trade Cejudo to one. And get, I don't know, whoever you want from one over there. Get Rod Tag. No, don't get Rod Tag. Get somebody to bring over to one and do a trade, and then have Henry and DJ fight in one.
Oh, I would
do the rubber match.
Yeah, I wonder if that
bring Adriano Moraes over and see how he does against UFC lightweights.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sage Northcutt to be signed later.
Sage Northcutt hit a heel hook, and my nose started bleeding.
It's like he did what? Yeah, that was something else.
Yeah.
The man. Never mind. I'm about to go really inappropriate. I'll say that for all.
What position gets my face the farthest from my opponent's fists? Yeah. Let's try a heel hook.
Yeah, I don't think that's the position that changed Sage Northcutt, if you know what I mean. The ground game has had a lot more reps than. Yeah, Sage Northcutt became a man since we last saw him. Okay, he had a different vibe about him this go out. So, all right, fellas. Another quick one for you. Julianna Pena is out of UFC 289, and Irene Aldana steps in her place to face Amanda Nunes for the UFC's bantamweight championship. Did the UFC luck out, or was this just a lateral move, fellas?
I lucked out. It was the fight I wanted the whole time.
It's the one that Nunes wanted the whole time.
Yeah.
Course correct. This is Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Life found a way.
Yes.
Okay. This was supposed to happen.
This is Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption. UFC matchmaking crawled through a river of shit and came out clean on the other side. Like this. Anything that takes you from a trilogy matchup to a new challenger, it's an upgrade in my mind.
Oh, yeah.
If you can justify the new challenger at all, which you can here. Again, Nunes thought that Aldana was going to be her next challenger already and was like, all right, I'll do the Pena thing again if that's what you really want to spend my remaining 2 fights before I retire on. No, I love it.
It's way better stylistically. I mean, it's going to be a fun fight to watch.
And hell, maybe we end up with 3 Mexican champions at the end of this year.
Yep, and watch the UFC fumble the bag on that one.
They go to like Guatemala and be like, well, that's it, right?
It's like, well, close enough that they'll set up shop in Iowa or something like this. Yeah. All right, fellas.
What San Diego's for?
I was going to say Albuquerque. Albuquerque. It says Mexico in the name, guys.
Yeah.
They'll have another fight night in Rio Rancho, and they'll just put new, really small in the New Mexico.
All right, fellas. Well, I've been waiting to do this for a couple weeks now. It's time for the greatest titled segment in all of media history. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, where we share something that surprised us or ironically did not since we last met. We had UFC, we had Ryzen, we had one championship, we had Game Bread, Bare Knuckle, we had Canelo fighting. There were so many people getting punched in the face for money since we last talked. What is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment, Mr. Hawkins?
I kind of gave it away part of it earlier. The knowledge of the crowd in at the one event really threw me for a loop. I was used to the, grab his Dick and Twist It crowd, and it just wasn't that. You know, that's kind of got used to that a little too much at lately, and you know, I was surprised that there wasn't a knee landed. Again, kind of gave that out. And then when it comes to the UFC, I wasn't surprised that the judges can't get out of their way. I guess that's MMA everywhere. Felt like all the other judging pretty much across the board from all the events I watched over the week were pretty good. And then, you know, the main event, like as you guys in your guys' mind, the Rec guy won, but kind of marred by a bizarre judge.
All right, good one there. All right, Jay.
I'm sorry, can I interject something real quick?
Of course.
It just occurred to me. Like, we've talked a few times about the regulatory complications that the one championship event evaded, partially through planning and partially just through, serendipity or backstage discussion. Do you know what really would have been interesting? If something happened that was allowed by Colorado, but banned by one championship, like instead of vice versa. Like, what if in the main event, like Adriano Moraes just suplexed Johnson on his head, knocked him out, pointed at Matt Hume in the corner of Johnson, said, "It's legal here. Disqualify me and see what the fuck happens."
I don't know if it came across on the broadcast, but in the arena they did read off that it was illegal to spike on your head. And real quick, not to derail, but the other thing that was awesome about one is that all the interviews were played throughout the arena. So like when they're interviewing Chatri and stuff, you hear it you're in the arena. You're hearing all the pre-show stuff when they're getting ready. That's all pre-recorded usually for UFC and stuff. That's live, and you're watching the guy, and it's playing throughout the arena. So that was just another way that you didn't feel like you were just in an empty hole of an arena. You were a part of the show from start to finish because you could hear everything.
That would have been fun to cover too, instead of like the UFC sticks you down in the dungeon with the pizzas to like interview the winning fighters.
Granted, the pizzas, I do like pizza. I was talking to our boy Jason Burgos while he attended UFC 288, and he sent me a picture of where he was, and they put him in like some press box that was like hovering in a helicopter above the arena, and I was like, man, as long as they got food up there, man, you'd be all right. That was. Just give me the food. All right. So Jay, what's your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment this week?
So we and Ben has this also with his fellow Schillen, Davy Health Keith Schillen, have a pantheon of fighters like Darren, middle name redacted Elkins, and Clay, middle name redacted Guida, and fighters like that.
The original is Paul fucking Craig.
And Paul Craig, and all of those names, and you have them, and just you see him pull off a win, and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe he did it, or whatever, that excitement factor of that nickname redacted fighter. Roy Big Country Nelson came out of retirement to go hang out in Florida without gloves on, and fought Dylan Kleckler, who is the guy who, this is going to be the saddest sentence I'll utter in a while, killed Justin Thornton in BKFC when he knocked out Thornton and landed on his neck, and Thornton passed away after the fight. So, Roy Nelson, Dylan Kleckler, Roy Nelson, 46 years young, gray beard, no different than what you saw him last. He has not changed, even though I know he works like a crazy person. He trains with Ngannou sometimes over at XC. He's putting in the time and still is whatever. So he gets up there, gets beat up for a while, looks 46. Ooh, looks 46. That right hand. That Roy friggin' Nelson right hand. Over the top, behind the ear, Kleckler goes down. It's all over. Roy Nelson is back in the MMA win column. This is bare knuckle MMA, which is sanctioned, which is in Fight Finder. Roy Nelson won a fight by Roy Nelson's Big Country breakfast right hand. And, sometimes you just got to let that happen.
Definitely. Okay, Ben, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, UFC 288 just happened. As with all UFC cards, I previewed it, made official picks. I get things wrong all the time. this is an unpredictable sport. I'm not the smartest guy on the planet. I mean, even the money lines only get it right about 67, 68% of the time. As long as I'm better in the coin flip, I figure I still have a job. But I was so dead wrong on the Drew Dober versus Matt Frevola fight, because the one thing that had distinguished itself about Drew Dober as he went from the stocky, cauliflower-eared, Duke Nukem looking Nebraskan guy that you're just always surprised isn't a wrestler into an actual fringe contender is that he found power to go with the surprising classiness of his striking, and getting in a close quarters firefight with him was suicide. Just from, Bobby Green on back, like his last 6 or 7 knockouts were first or second round knockouts where some guy decided to bite down on the mouth guard, realized that Drew Dober had that Dustin Poirier thing of being really hard to hit in the phone booth, and they went down. And I said that Frevola fighting in or near his hometown was going to try to get a knockout of Dober and get into exactly the kind of firefight that was going to end up with him face down. And I was 100% wrong, because Frevola got into that kind of firefight and he came out on the right end of it. Whether that spells the beginning of the end for Dober, a guy who's, his success depends on his short range reflexes and his chin, or this was just a hiccup, I don't know. But I was very, very surprised, Mr. Falcons, at that outcome.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest shock on the entire card. Fantastic knockout by Frevola. All right, gentlemen, my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment comes courtesy of UFC President Dana White, who after 288 concluded, during the post-fight press conference, he was asked, and I wish I knew the gentleman's name, because credit to him for actually giving Dana some pushback here. He claims that Power Slap's metrics are greater than the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, F1 racing, and WWE combined. I, sir, call bullshit. That is spectacular. Like this absolute fanatical devotion to something that is very clearly failing is comical, to say the least. He claims that he just got a deal for Power Slap that's greater than the UFC's first deal with Spike TV after The Ultimate Fighter concluded. Did we count inflation for that too? I mean, that was what, like, what, like 20 years ago, something like that. We're really doing this. So I'm not surprised that Dana is being himself right now. Power Slap sucks. All right. And
unless the metric he was referring to is traumatic brain injury, yeah, he's lying.
Yeah.
Or absolute number of drug test failures. Dude, so many of those guys popped.
Yeah.
Which PFL should be careful with that too. So
a sport full of 40-year-old guys with arms like fucking hams. Like, what a surprise.
Yeah. I just thought they were all chronic masturbators. All right. So let's keep things.
You gotta balance with both hands.
All right, fellas. Well, let's keep things pushing here. We're going to conclude things with a very slight mention of UFC on ABC 4 main event between Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Jolton Almeida. I mean, I think that main event kind of gives you a feel for what we can expect from this card, right? This is not,
and it just lost its biggest fight in terms of the number of UFC appearances of the competitors. Like, during this show, I just typed up a news report that Dern versus Hill got bumped a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the main event of the May.
Yes, the main event of the May 20th card. What I want to know, if any of you know the answer to this, tell me, because this was supposed to be fight night, Anthony Smith versus Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
Johnny Walker and Smith got demoted to the co-main event, got demoted to a 3-round fight, and Rozenstruik and Almeida got moved to the main event. Does anybody know why? Like, it's weird, the kind of slights that Anthony Smith seems to be getting while still actively working a desk and doing a good job for the UFC. Like, very famously, he lost, his fight when his opponent Jamal Hill was promoted to a title shot. Like,
and he
just
found out on air.
He found out on air.
Yeah.
And then his headlining appearance on May 13th got demoted to the co-main event with no real explanation given. Does anybody know why?
The only possible thing I had heard was that Walker wasn't ready for 5 rounds, but I don't know if that's true. That's the only explanation.
Johnny Walker isn't ready for 2 rounds. Like, what surprise is that?
It's like it's Johnny Walker. Like,
he's a 245-pound light heavyweight.
Right.
Yeah, I don't quite get.
I don't know what that would be, but if I was I wonder what their contract situations are. I would think maybe that might be something where they don't want to headline a guy who's in the last fight of his contract, because then you have. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, but it seems that's something that they would know beforehand, right? Like, they wouldn't even book Anthony Smith or Johnny Walker in a headliner if, like, okay, this is a final fight in the contract, and they have him re-signed. Yeah. So, but Matt, you could be right. This could be some sort of negotiation ploy. It could be a pay thing too. Like, Anthony Smith, a former title challenger. I don't know if his contract leads to him getting extra money for main event spots. If some accountant just looks, oh wait, he's going to get paid an extra 20 grand. No, bump him down. Like, it could have been anything. So. Because they already, Rosenstruck and Almeida were already on the card, and that fulfilled the quota of just heavyweights that are going to hit each other on the card that they have to have. I don't know if they suddenly thought, okay, post a pay-per-view on, and especially on ABC, let's headline with the big guys, because they believe that heavyweight fights are all that anybody wants to see. But still, yet again, they knew this was coming up right after the pay-per-view. They knew this was going to be on ABC. So why didn't you leave with that? I'm curious as to what we're going to understand about that situation. I expect that to be a talking point as media week starts for this event. And hopefully one of our friends and colleagues that will be there can ask the questions and get us some answers, and we'll discuss it next week.
I'm betting that North Carolina doesn't have the refund policy by changing the main event either, because they probably in California and Nevada, you change the main event, you have to offer refunds to the fans that purchase tickets. So if they don't have that clause, that would also be a reason why they would pull Dern and Hill off that card, because fans can't get a refund. So if you're going all of a sudden it got a little bit weaker, you're going, maybe I'll just go out that night, get my money back. You don't have that option without that clause there. So that'll be interesting.
That's a guy who travels to every event would know all that stuff. Yeah. Like this. See, that's what I get for never leaving the house. All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of the Living Death Show. Big shout out to Matt Hawkins. Always welcome. Love to have you on. And before we officially wrap things up, just let you guys know, of course, we took that 2 or 3 week break, whatever. The purpose of it was, I hope you don't hear my son screaming in the background there. Yep, but anyway, you hear? Okay, all right. I don't know what inspired him to do that, but I'll figure out in just a few minutes here. Well, we us three, me, Jay, and Ben, we had a talk about a month ago or something, and we just wanted to give the show a different direction. Like we've been sort of doing the same thing week in, week out for several years now. And it was like, it's time for a refresh. We constantly, now my kids are in the room. We constantly talk about how mundane these cards get, and we just see the same sort of product recycled over and over and over again, to the point where it's very difficult to distinguish one thing from another. We kind of felt like that was bleeding into the show. Like we felt like us losing enthusiasm was making us lose enthusiasm for us talking about it. We're all three very good friends. So talking about it not only is a professional thing, in the sense that we're all three, professional media members and we cover the sport and all that, but we're three friends that enjoy fights, and we look forward to just talking about things. If we have a hard time, just getting giddy about talking about fights with guys that are just like us, maybe it's time to retool a little bit. So we're doing that. We're trying to retool. So moving forward, we're going to stick more so to like very specific segments about breaking news, about upcoming matchups and whatnot. And just the topics you expect to hear from us, we're going to be talking about, just not in a chunk of an hour and a half every week. But that being said, we're still, for big events like a weekend that we just had, when you got all these big shows running, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about everything. So the show that you just saw today is that's not going to be the typical, but you'll have that typical banter, the typical analysis, the typical conversation between the three of us with occasional guests like my man Matt Hawkins here. So I hope you guys like the changes. If you have any ideas, suggestions, questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to hit up any one of us on Twitter, DM, tweet, direct tweets, whatever. You can contact us. We'll talk about it. And yeah, we'd love to hear what you have to say. And I hope this change isn't too jarring, but at the same time, I hope it provides a better listening experience for you. You get some bite-sized segments of what we do, and it doesn't take you a week to listen to the whole damn thing. So, I hope you guys like what we have to offer. And with that being said, we'll be doing some of the branding and graphics and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I got some work cut out to get some of that rolling. But anyway, remember to like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Check out Matt Hawkins. Oh, this way, yes, because check out Matt Hawkins on the Coast to Coast podcast with Ed Carbajal.
Coast to Coast Combat Hour. Sorry,
Coast to Coast Combat Hour. Sorry,
Coast to Coast Combat Hour.
Coast to Coast Combat Hour.
Slap me up.
Yeah, yeah. So check them out. Check their show out. Ben and Jay, of course, you can find their work on Sherdog.com. And new little thing for me, you can find my work on Ringside Intel. So go ahead and check that out as well. Stay beautiful. Stay positive. Stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.